my name is Beck and welcome to my July reading wrap up. I am just recovering from COVID, so I apologise in advance for my voice, but I wanted to get this wrap up filmed because I'm filming this on the 30th of July. I thought, why not wrap up the whole month? So I read a ton this month, and I think that's because I turned to a lot of shorter things because I knew that I had a few larger things on my reading list as well. So without further ado, let's jump into what I finished. Firstly, there are two carryovers from the previous month. So I finished Sword of Kaigen and I also finished Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse, and I talk about them in depth in a reading vlog that is coming up very shortly. So I won't cover these too much, but just know that with Sword of Kaigen, I initially thought in my previous wrap up that I was going to love it. And I didn't. I ended up going from a 4-star rating to a 2-star rating for this one because the ending really tanked everything for me, and there were some distinct choices in the narrative that I deeply disagreed with. So unfortunately that became one of my most disappointing reads of the entire year. But on the back of that, Black Sun was amazing and I gave it 4.5 stars, and I immediately went out and ordered Fevered Star, and that has now arrived, but it's at my parents' house. So when I'm well again and I can go and pick that up, I will. But I loved Black Sun and it is 100% worth the hype. So I will talk about this in a reading vlog, but just know that I loved it. I did though have 2 DNFs this month, which means did not finish, so I put 2 things down. One of those is the new Stephen Leeds Death and Faxes book by Brandon Sanderson. I've really enjoyed the Stephen Leeds novella, I think, trilogy that Sanderson has written. It's about a guy named Stephen Leeds. It's a detective-esque story, and it's about a guy who has multiple personalities in his own head, and so they solve crimes together. But the way that Death and Faxes was written, it really just struck me the wrong way. It didn't feel like Sanderson's writing. I think it was a collaboration, but I'm not sure. I think the writing, I said in my notes, felt clunky, and that there was a woman called Chunky. Like, just say fat or just say curvy. Like, it just seemed a bit odd at the time. It didn't really feel like Sanderson, basically, which is why I gave up. I started it and then knew it wasn't going to be for me, and I put it straight down. So I don't even think I got 10% into this. It just didn't feel like Sanderson, and I felt a disconnect for his novellas that he's collaborated with, so this one was no different. Next up though, I found a 5-star read, and that is The Tea Dragon Society. This is a very short graphic novel, and it's about a young girl who is part goblin, and she's trying to live up to her mum's wishes and learn their traditions, but she also doesn't really feel connected to them. And one day she finds this little dragon in an alley and saves him, and then takes him back to his keeper, and the keeper says, well, do you want to learn about tea dragons? And so I love how this encaptured tradition and learning and understanding and responsibility, and it was just so cozy, and I love cozy fantasy and cozy sci-fi at the moment. It's really wholesome, and the whole cozy vibe comes from there not being an overarching conflict. Like in a fantasy book, for example, there might be a bad guy who is choosing to start the apocalypse or something, and the hero has to stop them. There's nothing like that in here. It's no conflict. It's just these characters and their interpersonal, not woes, but not tensions either, but understandings and coming to grips with those. And so it's more of an internal struggle rather than an external one against external forces, and I really loved this. It is a new favourite of the entire year, and if you haven't read these, I implore you to, because it was beautiful. Now, I've lent this next one out to a friend, but I gave it 4 stars and really enjoyed it. You can tell I was on a graphic novel kick this month in between my massive reads. Mooncakes is the name of it. It was absolutely lovely. It's a standalone graphic novel. It follows Nova, and she is a hearing impaired girl, and then there's also Tam, and they are non-binary, and Tam is part werewolf, and there's this jungle kind of spirit that is causing havoc, and these two have to unite and address it. And I don't want to say too much more because it's very short and I don't want to give any spoilers away, but it's just lovely. Again, it's very cozy, and there is some kind of conflict in it, but nothing hugely world changing. It's more in their world. With their family and their direct friends. So I just love that it was also a friends to lovers romance in here with Tam and Nova. They knew each other in their childhood, and so now they've kind of come back and rekindled what they had. So it's just really cute and trusting and just beautiful. There is magic in there. The colours are beautiful in this graphic novel, and I had a great time. So I would recommend that one as well. Tea Dragon Society has been my favourite, but Mooncakes was pretty great too. And then we have an audiobook, and this audiobook is called Emergency Skin. It's by N.K. Jemisin, and I loved the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, but this is about a 4-hour audiobook. No, an hour. It was very, very short. And it follows a character who is coming back to Earth after Earth has been previously abandoned, and this character is seeking something, but you're not sure what. And because it's so short, again, I don't want to say too much about it, but it surprised me that it was narrated by Jason Isaacs, who played Lucius Malfoy. He did a brilliant job of the narration, and it was supposed to be a very brisk and demanding narration and give you room in between to kind of reminisce and think about ramifications of things. So the narrator spoke directly to you as a reader, which I would have found jarring. And I did initially, but then I just sunk into the story and it was like it was normal. So I quite enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I don't know if I would reread it necessarily. Maybe I would to kind of glean more understanding from it, but it was enjoyable. I liked it. It was a sci-fi and I'm glad I read it. Then we have another audiobook that I listened to while I was doing a lot of filing at work, and it's called Work For It, ironically. It's a male-male romance by Talia Hibbert, and I loved the Brown Sisters trilogy by Talia Hibbert. So I was like, I need to try other stuff by her. This book was very spicy in a very good way, so would recommend. It's a romance between these two guys. It's like a small town romance, and so this character who is really struggling with his mental health goes on like a retreat to this farm, and the guy who owns the farm is the love interest. So you get them starting to trust each other, I suppose. It's a very short audiobook as well, like 4 or 5 hours long, and it's just a bite-sized romance. It's very steamy. It's what I wanted. It was enjoyable, it was a fun time. I'd probably give it like a 3.5 stars. And then I read another one that I gave 5 stars, and that is the second Lore Olympus book. This came out during July, so it's a new release, and I'm so happy that I'm up to date on this series. Well, at least physically, it is a webcomic as well. This follows Persephone and Hades. It's a retelling of their love story, but it's taking it super duper slowly, which I really like. We love a slow burn. And I gave this again 5 stars. I can't say too much about it because it's a sequel, but it's just so good. It's the Olympian gods in modern day with technology, with magazines, tabloids, with a persona of like a media persona. I really enjoyed this, and it had Persephone getting a job. That's all I can say. There are characters in here that I viscerally hate, and there are characters in here that I love so much. So this author is doing so much with being able to craft their world building and reimagine the gods in their own way, and I'm really enjoying it. So if you haven't picked up Lore Olympus yet, I would say give it a crack, because it really combines such a light-hearted nature and a tense atmosphere in it, and I think those things combine really well, and the art style is beautiful. So love this. Definitely gonna reread this series. It's one of my new favorites. And then I read another cozy sci-fi and also a new release, and it's A Prayer for the Crown Shy, which is the second Monk and Robot book. Now, I gave the first one in this series a 3 stars, and I wanted a little bit more from it in terms of plot and trajectory, and that's what this book gave me. So I gave this one a 4, and I really enjoyed it. And this series is about a character who is non-binary, and they are a traveling tea monk. So they pretty much craft tea for everyone who comes to them with their different problems, and they talk things through. And in this civilization, robots also up and left about 100 years ago or more, and no one has seen or heard from them since. And so in the first book, you get a meeting of the first robot and this main character. And I'm not saying too much more about where the plot goes, because there's not really a plot. It's more introspective and character driven, and it's like that for a reason, because it gives you space to ponder different questions about our humanity, and I really love that about it. It's so bite-sized, but it's so enormous as well in terms of what the scope is that it's trying to capture, and I think it does it really well. This one is really telling us that it's enough to just exist and not produce, and I love that message so much. It's also a cozy sci-fi, and so there's no outer conflict, and so this is an internal conflict that the character is really struggling with, and I really saw that represented, and I loved it a lot. And then unfortunately I am putting down a series because I've given it a really good crack, and I got 215 pages into Abaddon's Gate. At least I started it, and then I put it down because this was such a slow beginning. The characters that were introduced I wasn't interested in. It introduces a whole host of new characters pretty much each book, and sometimes they're really great and captivating like they were in book 2, but in this book I just don't really care about them. There's been a bit of not misdirection, but not really a marrying up of a character in here. Like, she'll do something and then suffer for it in the same chapters, and it's like, well, if you don't want to do those things, you're the only one pushing yourself to do them, so why are you constantly creating your own conflict? Like, going as far as killing people, like, wouldn't you pull back on doing something like that? So it's not something that I'm particularly interested in anymore, and I've got to push a lot to read this, so I'll either read them on audiobook, which I'm doubtful of, or I'll just watch the TV show. So I've officially put this series down, unfortunately. I'm a bit sad about it, but it is what it is. Like, if I'm not enjoying it and it's making my other reading slow down, which it did for the second half of this month, then I'm not gonna continue the series because it's not worth it. It's tanking all of my other reading, and as soon as I put this down I did a lot more reading, so it really did slow me down quite a lot. So I'm really happy that I've now made the decision at last and I'm not going to continue anymore. Then I read another graphic novel, and that is the Tea Dragon Festival, and this is a companion to the Tea Dragon Society, so they follow different characters. They're not direct sequels. So this follows a character named Rin, and she runs across a dragon in the mountain, and he's been asleep for like 80 years or something, and so it's reintroducing him to society as it is now, and him feeling responsible because he was supposed to look after this town, but he had a nap that was 80 years long. So I like the characters in here, but it ultimately felt a little bit rushed, and it's like there was too much trying to be squished in and not enough time for it to breathe. We did also explore characters that were in the previous book, and I feel like they've been addressed already, so it felt unnecessary to explore them even more. So when it came to the content of this, I felt like I wanted something else from it, and I also felt a little bit led astray. It felt almost like a prequel, I guess, and I wanted not necessarily a sequel, but I wanted more in the world as it is rather than the world as it was. So I liked it. I didn't dislike it. I gave it 3 stars, but out of the 2 so far, I would reread the first one. I don't know if I'd bother rereading the second one. And then I was lucky enough to win a contest on Instagram, and that is Take a Bow, Noah Mitchell by Tobias Madden. And this is a book about 2 boys, and it basically says, step 1, make him fall in love with me. Step 2, tell him the truth. So obviously Noah Mitchell is our main character, and he has this crush on a boy, and he joins a musical to get close to him. And while I really enjoyed this one as well, it was a great romp. It was a YA, so it was very quick to read. There were elements of this that were relatable to me in the hobbies of the characters, but when it came to the storytelling, I was like, oh, I don't really jive with the lying, and the whole premise is based around that. So I was hoping it would come to an end, but that's also wishful thinking when the whole premise is based around it, so it's obviously the whole arc of the story. I do like the way that it was handled though, and I feel like the conversations in here were somewhat realistic, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I liked the sister and I liked the family, so there were a lot of moments in here that I quite enjoyed, and the characters are just great. So if you can pick this up in September, that's when it's coming out. I enjoyed it. It's not a favourite contemporary of mine, but it was a lot of fun to read, and I think it was handled very well. And then we've got the next Dresden book I finally finished on audio, Dresden number 15, called Skin Game, and I gave this a 3.75. It was very hard for me to give it a 4 because it didn't feel like a 4. The first half of the book was kind of cringe, and Dresden making his way towards things, whereas the Dresden series for me is really lush and full with all of the side characters, and so the beginning didn't quite marry up with that. I'm being very careful about spoilers. And then the ending was absolutely amazing, and how dare this make me cry after starting so meh. So I really loved the different ways that some of the side characters grew in this book. One of those moments were like cataclysmic at the very end, and I loved it so much. And I did see a few things coming in here. There is one character that tends to move the others around a lot, and I thought that that character would be kind of suspect, and it turned out that they were. So I was like, well, I kind of saw that coming, but this book really reintroduced a lot of the side characters to me that I had since not forgotten, but just got distracted from during reading the series, and because I took such a massive break from it because I had my jaw surgery, I was like, well, this is the perfect book to pick back up and get back into the series because it's reintroducing everyone to me in the context that they need to be in right now. So I understood contextually where they were, and I remembered their name, and I remembered who they were interacting with and their situation. So this is a good book to pick back up again because I'd had such a massive break. But it wasn't a book that is highly rated for me in the Dresden series. Based on my rating, it would probably be like similar, like a little bit better than the first book, but very much on par with that first book in terms of just my enjoyment factor. With a plot, it did a lot more than the first book, but with my enjoyment, not so much. So kind of getting past that cringe element of the beginning of the story, then into the middle and the second half, amazing. So I'm happy to be back on the Dresden bandwagon. And that is pretty much everything I've read during July. Like I said, I'm filming this on the 30th, so I'm still currently reading Ruin of Kings. I am just over halfway through. I'm 53%, so just over that line. And I'm really loving this, but I just don't think that I'm going to be able to finish it during July. I will really try, but I don't think I can. Ruin of Kings will hopefully be finished soon, and then I've got the magical readathon happening for all of August, but I'm hoping that with all of my short books, I have not posted my TBR yet, but I'm hoping with all the short books that I've picked, I can finish them all in like a week or so, and then that will give me space to read the other things on my August TBR, because I have massive reading plans. So cross your fingers for me because I'm gonna need it. But this is a brilliant book. It's a fantasy, it's about demons and body swapping, and it starts out with two characters. One is a mimic, and so she can shapeshift, and she is the guard keeper of this cell, and our main character Kieran is trapped in this cell, and they've got this stone, and between them they have to recount the story of how they got to that point. So it's also told through a scholar, and he is writing the story. So it's a reflective story, and then you get the characters being introspective, and so you don't actually know where these characters are at the moment. Like, is that jail cell where they are now? But there's so many moving perspectives in here, and I thought I'd be alienated by it, but I actually love it. So if you are hesitating on picking this up because it's really long, because I kept putting it off, please pick it up because it is well worthwhile. I love the relationships, I love the writing style and the tone, I like Kieran's voice, and I really love the way that the narration is just all overlapping. It's very seamless, and I'm very impressed. So those are all of the books that I have read and I'm currently reading for the month of July. Let me know what you've read as well. Hopefully you're staying healthy, and let me know what you're currently reading in the comments. I would love to know, but thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.